Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Grajdek. I'm Dr. Martha Grajdek. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Today I want to talk to you about the stigma of mental health at the workplace. This is an important topic of conversation. Although mental health has been brought into the light a little more in the last number of years, there is still a big deal of misunderstandings, assumptions, and quite a divide between the idea of health, specifically this division of our physical health and our mental health or emotional health. And while physical health has a certain assumption, perception, view associated with it, when it comes to mental health, unfortunately, to a large degree, it is not afforded the same kind of importance and respect that we would give to physical health. This can be especially important when it comes to the workplace. The obvious idea here is that health of all kinds is equally important. So whether we're talking about physical health and any kind of wellness or ailments, or whether we're talking about mental health or emotional health, all of those ideas, all of those concepts are equally important and are deserving of our attention and respect. There is a certain workplace stigma when it comes to mental health. And the reality of that is that it really does reflect how mental health is viewed in our society. And again, when we compare mental health and how it is viewed to physical health and how that is viewed, there's a big difference between the two. And if there is a difference in our society, we certainly cannot expect that the two will magically be understood and equally accepted as important at the workplace. After all, our workplaces are made up of people who are part of our society. But what we can do is take a look at mental health, how it plays into the workplace environment and the workplace experience. Learn about it, become more open and comfortable with the topic of conversation, and be proactive in creating the kinds of workplace environments that help to lessen or erase this kind of stigma. While this is true of any kind of health issues, whether it's physical health or mental health, there is a great deal of misunderstanding when it comes to mental health. The entire topic is often filled with myths and misconceptions. That in itself contributes to the stigma that comes along with the idea of mental health. Many times when the idea of mental health is presented or discussed, it is viewed from the angle of mental illness rather than something that encompasses both illness but also well-being, both treatment and preventative measures. And while the concept of physical health has been given that kind of consideration, a more encompassing way of looking at it, so we can look at preventative measures and the idea of well-being, just as we can look at actual illness. This is not yet the case when it comes to mental health. Things such as therapy, the idea of therapy, or being under a doctor's care for mental health, or even having a diagnosis or treatment requirements can be confusing and mysterious to people. Sometimes conversations pertaining these topics can be avoided or discouraged at the workplace. But the reality is that not knowing or ignorance of the topic of mental health only adds to erroneous perceptions, only adds to potential issues and that stigma that we're talking about today. It's not uncommon that when we don't know something, when we have a certain ignorance or misunderstanding of a topic or of an idea, that can lead to things such as fear or feeling uneasy about it, or even prejudice. And while physical health or physical health issues are not completely free of any kind of stigma, when it comes to the idea of mental health, we're much more likely to see that at the workplace. One of the ways of addressing this issue, this stigma, as it pertains to mental health, especially at the workplace, is to first and foremost have some open and honest communications. And of course, things such as organizational training or company training can come in very handy. Now, that's not to say that an organization should be expected to give a training to their employees on mental health diagnosis or mental health issues, unless that's their business, that's their field, of course. But rather, just as a company might offer training to their employees that pertains to well-being, meaning physical well-being of their employees, so too similar training should be incorporated into that working experience where mental health is addressed, where the wellness, emotional and psychological wellness of employees is addressed. This can shed some light on some mental health issues, but also it opens the door for preventative measures and for open-minded thinking that will allow both the organization and its employees to embrace the kind of attitude, approach, and environment that allows for mental health wellness and does not alienate anyone who may be struggling with their mental well-being. Another part of a preventative approach would be for companies to offer support, not only support to help employees be healthy physically, but also ways for employees to be well mentally and emotionally. Things such as stress relief techniques or being able to know options as they pertain to finding a therapist, for example. Those can be very proactive. Creating the kind of environment and the kind of culture that promotes health across the board, not just physical health, but also emotional and psychological health, is key. It's not difficult to understand that a company can offer all kinds of benefits to promote health, be it physical or emotional, psychological health. But if the environment does the opposite, if the environment makes you sick, then all of that support is essentially nearly in vain. Building a healthy environment, building a healthy culture is a company's responsibility and opportunity, of course, because they benefit tremendously from a healthy workforce. But it's also a responsibility of each individual employee. This is where communications are so important. The company has the responsibility to encourage open communications and to provide the kind of trainings and support that benefit their employees. But employees have to be able to speak up and ask for what they need. And of course, employees have the responsibility of participating in any kind of training or support that is being offered or resource that is being offered by the company as they need it. Imagine if a company was housing their employees in a building, for example, that maybe had some kind of toxic fumes being released into the air, or maybe had some kind of other health hazard that was very obviously a health hazard. Of course, once that is known, the company has the responsibility to take care of it right away, to clean up the environment. This is no different when we look at physical health, or if we're looking at emotional and psychological health. So things such as, for example, air quality are as important as an environment that is as stress-free or as low in stress as possible. An environment that is supportive of the company's employees. An environment that is conducive to their success and well-being. And of course, when we combine the idea of a healthy environment, a supportive environment, and supportive attitudes from both management and non-management, now we're looking at the organization's culture. And although culture comes from the top, it's everybody's responsibility to contribute to a desired culture to make sure that it's maintained into the future. The bottom line is this: health of all sorts is important, especially when it comes to the workplace. And while the company has the majority of the responsibility and opportunity to make sure that employees are aware and supported in terms of preventative measures and healthy practices, employees have some sense of responsibility as well to ask questions, ask for support, and participate in what is available to them to keep themselves and their colleagues healthy and well. As more and more people speak up about mental health, well-being, and mental health issues, we cannot continue to ignore these topics of conversations at the workplace. We have seen some very well-known people, celebrities, sports figures, addressing mental health, or perhaps the aftermath of their suffering from mental health. And of course, that gets our attention because these are people who are well known, who are in the news. But this is just as important to address at the workplace. A company absolutely cannot shy away from addressing mental health and mental wellness. If we have any chance of alleviating the stigma that is so often associated with mental health, we absolutely have to be proactive and supportive. That goes for the organization as much as it does for every individual employee. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. It is no secret and no surprise that there's a certain stigma when it comes to mental health at the workplace. Much of that is because mental health simply does not have the kind of acceptance that physical health and physical well-being has been able to enjoy over the years. Some of that, of course, is linked to simply a lack of understanding, lack of training or education, and lack of communication. And while companies cannot be expected to provide courses in mental health, they absolutely can focus their efforts on preventative measures and health well-being, both for physical and mental health. Creating the kind of environment and the kind of culture that promotes a better understanding and open communications on the topic of mental health is the first step to any organization's success in eliminating the stigma that is so often associated with mental health. And keep in mind that while we focus on preventative measures and have tools and benefits in place to keep people well, all of those efforts allow us to have opportunities to learn more about mental health. This takes away the mystery and the confusion that can so often lead to prejudice and stigma. As this week unfolds, I encourage everyone to think about mental health, and specifically mental health and mental well-being as it pertains to their own workplace. Whether you're a business owner or someone in management or leadership position, or you're an employee who is not in management, it's important for everybody to be aware and knowledgeable about the concept, the topic of health across the board. As humans, we are vulnerable to illnesses of all kinds. We are not machines, we are not robots, which means that sometimes we are well, other times we are not well. Understanding how to stay well, how to keep well, how to get well, whether we're talking physical health or mental health, is critical for everyone to examine. If you're an organization, it's your responsibility to make sure you're addressing that, to make sure that you're creating the kinds of environments and company cultures that support wellness across the board. And as an individual employee, you have to be able to speak up and ask for what you need. If you're experiencing fear or have feelings of prejudice simply because you don't understand the topic, or you simply don't know what to expect or what to think, seek out answers, seek out some training and education. So often that can be enough to ease your mind and help you to make the kind of working environment that is pleasant for you and for your colleagues. The bottom line is this: we're all grown-ups with jobs. Our responsibility extends beyond simply showing up and doing our jobs. We are here to interact with other people, so we have to make the best of it. That means that everybody has to do their part. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G, where you can find the video version of the podcast. While there, check out some of the other videos. They all focus on a comprehensive approach to stress management. Stress Free with Dr. G can be found on YouTube, and the link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.